teacher know exactly. Recently, there are many emerging unique concepts and new way of learning and teaching in higher education. For instance, there are new trends with notion of machine learning, project-based learning, experiential learning, gaming, nano learning, and a lot more. Purpose of today's Journal Club session is to focus that how faculty can improve their teaching skills, especially when we talk about designing the course instructions and enforce student-centered and self-directed learning. How can educators enhance the quality of teaching and interaction to engage students in learning process? And also we shall know about the significance of integration and human dimensions during teaching activities. The topic for presentation is the Fink's model of significant learning, and it's matter of great pleasure and honor to present very eminent speaker, Dr. D. Fink. Very warm welcome, Dr. D. Fink, to Sesame Rayyan. Dr. D. Fink served as a director of Instructional Development Program at University of Oklahoma for 26 years, from 1979 until his retirement in 2005. He was president of Board Network from 2004 to 2005, which is a professional and organizational development in higher education. It is a primary professional organization for faculty developers in the United States. He is an author of book named as Creating Significant Learning Experiences, an integrated approach to designing college courses. So I hope that this will be a wonderful session and with Dr. D. And I shall be moderating this session, and for your question and answers, we have kept last 15 minutes. You can keep your questions with you, either raise hand by end of session, or you can put up your questions in chat box. I shall be keeping eyes and we shall answer by end of session. Before we start, I expect that if Dr. Khalid is around, if he would like to give some opening remarks, or on his behalf, if Dr. Al-Mardi want to say and give some opening remarks, and we can start.
Thank you very much, Shazia. On behalf of the chair of the Riyadh office, Professor Khalid Al-Abdul Rahman, we welcome you, Dr. T, and we thank you so very much for your time. And without further ado, you can start your presentation. Thank you very much.
All right. Well, thank you all for inviting me and giving me the pleasure of visiting with people in Saudi Arabia. As I was mentioning earlier to Marty and Shazia, I've had the pleasure of visiting Saudi Arabia, I think it was 2 times before, over in Dammam. One of the universities there invited me to do some workshop, or also had a chance to do a workshop at the medical college that I think was in that area anyway. Sometimes when I'm traveling around, I don't always know where I'm going, where I'm at, but I was there, and the people were very hospitable, and my wife joined me on that second visit. We had a good time. I'm going to go ahead and share my screen with you all. Is this share here? Okay. Okay, there we go. Well, first of all, I want to, let's see. I want to say greetings and welcome the people who are here. Let me ask a question, and let me just ask a show of hands. How many people here have heard of Benjamin Bloom and his famous taxonomy? I asked this before, and Shazia said she estimated approximately half. Just raise your hand, or put your hand up in the screen there, in the participants, I guess it is. Roughly how many people we got? Okay, several people. Well, I'm going to make reference to that, so it's just helpful to know how many people have that. Okay, thank you. The other thing you may or may not know, my book, which was published in 2003 and then updated in 2013, was in fact translated into Arabic some years ago. I don't know if people know about that, but here is the here's the book. It was I think it's Obeikan, was the Obaiken?
Bacon,
Yeah, was the publisher. I don't know if that's something people, are you all from, are Marty and Shazia, or is this something you're familiar with or not?
Yes.
Okay. I don't know if that was how you found out about it. But just so be aware, you can read, I know most of you can, or all of you can read English quite well, but if you wanted it in Arabic, just be aware that that publication is available. What I'm going to focus on today are the two major themes in my book and that I talk about in my workshops that I've done at various places. One of those is, the first of those is just what is significant learning? What do I mean by significant learning? And what is it that is embodied in this taxonomy of significant learning that I related to that? But then we're going to move to the second question. And is once we find out what significant learning is, and if we decide that that is something good that we would like more of in our teaching, question, how do we create more of it through our teaching? Like I said, these are the two big themes in my book, but they're very, very closely related. In some ways, I would say significant learning, that concept of significant learning, for me, represents the goal of our teaching, or at least an appropriate, good, desirable goal. But once we have that, then this model of integrated course design that we look at is a tool for achieving. Okay.
I request participants to please keep your mic mute.
بس عندك الحجز عندك. اوه انا فتحت كيدي بنزل بتكلم.
Please keep your mic.
عملت كده؟ اوه
محمد عثمان يا محمد عثمان.
انا بقول لك انا فتحت كده هنزله ولا جيت ابديت؟ في ابديت.
محمد عثمان. I just wonder why where is he?
Okay, I will move on here. Okay, well, what are these taxonomies of learning? I put my concept of significant learning into this taxonomy. And a taxonomy of learning, anyway, is a set of distinct kinds of learning. Now, for a lot of people, the concept of kinds of learning is a novel one. We think of learning as learning, but that's not quite true. There are different kinds of it, and it is helpful to recognize what those different kinds are. This one that I referred to a moment ago, Bloom's taxonomy, was published in 1957 by a professor named Benjamin Bloom at the University of Chicago. And it was primarily what he called the cognitive domains. It's different kinds of cognitive learning. And it looks something like this. It starts at I'm going to change my view just a little bit about me. Can I do that here? No. Okay. Understand at the bottom, then comprehension, application, how to do something with it, analysis, identify the various parts of something, synthesis, finding the interaction between those different parts, and then finally at the top, evaluation, evaluating the quality or goodness of an idea, a thing, or whatever. And this taxonomy has been very helpful to professors for many decades because they can look at that and say, yes, I have to have some of those parts at the bottom, but I also want to strive or try to achieve, help my students achieve some of the kinds of learning of how to analyze, how to synthesize, how to evaluate, and so forth. And they hadn't thought of these kinds of learning before Bloom came along with this taxonomy. One, as I was sharing earlier with Dr. Iqbal and Dr. Marty, I had a course with Benjamin Bloom and became familiar with him when I started graduate school in Chicago in 1970. And like everybody else, I was very, very impressed with it. But later, starting with my graduate dissertation during the 70s, but then later in the 1990s, I started thinking about maybe there's some additional kinds of learning that are important besides the ones that are in Bloom's taxonomy. So I ended up, and I'll tell you how I created it, and that's significant in just a moment. But my taxonomy is similar to Bloom's in that both of it, his and mine, both have 6 kinds of learning in it. But it's also different in important ways. Now, the first is, his was about cognitive learning. I said that mine is about significant learning. What do I mean by significant learning? Well, let me move to this. Here is one problem I've seen with a lot of learning, both of myself and some of the courses I've had especially as a college student, but I've seen it in other professors' courses as well. And I call it the problem of learning going in and coming out. And here's what I mean by that. Here's a little, here's the difference. But let me back up here. The problem I see is students learn some ideas, some information, but for a short while. They learn it long enough to take a test on it and try to pass it, but after they get past the test and move on, 6 months later, 1 year later, the knowledge isn't there. The memory of the understanding of the concepts and terms. So it's like information in, information out, or as somebody sort of said in a pejorative way, it's like we're trying to dump knowledge into our students. They hold on to it long enough to take the test, and then they dump it out. Okay, so dumping it in and dumping it out. And as long as that's going on, I think that's a big problem, because of my definition, what I think we should be having as our goal is learning that stays, that lasts, and more importantly, learning that changes the way students live their lives. If their learning doesn't change, doesn't get incorporated into the way they think about themselves and the way they live their lives, what's the point of the whole operation anyway? Now, there are different ways. Some learning may affect the way they live their personal life. Some of it will affect the way they live their social life. In medical education, most of it is aimed at their professional life, affecting the way they do that. But even medical school, sometimes that's going to change their civic life, what they try to do to enable better public health provisions into society in relation to life in medicine. And we see that around us right now today. I don't know if this is true in Saudi Arabia. In the United States, there's a big struggle trying to convince people that it's a good idea to get the vaccinations. I know many of my friends are not doing it. I try to persuade them, but that's connecting my medical beliefs anyway with my civic responsibilities and pride with my fellow citizens. But medicine, as you know, affects the way we live some parts of our civic life. But coming back to the big thing, what I think we want is just not learning. Now, so if we decide that's the meaning I'm going to give to significant learning, and that's a good goal, how did I come up with this taxonomy, and how does